And welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Please make sure that you're on mute to limit background noise. We want this to be a respectful and interactive session as much as possible. So if you have a question, you can enter that into the chat. Just type it in and we'll be answering those if you have anything. We'll answer as many as we can. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are very excited to have Dr. Brandon Henderson here with us today. He's an assistant professor in the Department of Biomedical Sciences at Marshall University's Joan C. Edwards School of Medicine. He's the co-chair for the Basic Science Network within the Society for Research on Nicotine and Tobacco. He studied nicotine addiction for more than a decade and has recently been focused on vaping and how flavors affect the brain. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Henderson. Dr. Henderson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we have a few questions that were submitted ahead of time. So we'll get started with those. And then if anyone else has any questions, they can pop those into the chat box. So what kinds of things are you currently researching?
So there's I'll start with, I guess, the most important study because that's the one I was funded with first, and that's really directly looking at flavors and its impact on addiction. Because years ago, they didn't have any indication that flavors were anything other than what they would just call characterizing flavors. So it just tastes good, it just feels good. But some of my research has shown that it directly changes the brain in a way that's directly applicable to addiction-related behavior. That's one of the phrases we use in the field. So now, I've secured additional funding just to study that specifically and to figure out what exactly is happening in the brain, what are the brain regions, what are the neuron types, and then to figure out fully what the impact of flavors are. So I'd say that's the main thing we're looking at. But then we're also looking into the fact that nicotine is usually used with other drugs of abuse. And so what happens if, for example, a person is, opioid dependent and they use nicotine, whether it's by vaping or with a combustible cigarette, how do those two come together and enhance addiction so that way we can develop better treatment therapies?
Very, very interesting stuff. So, the one question that probably our ambassadors are going to want to know more than anything, our RAISE members, is vaping safe?
So that's a loaded question because, I'll give a little bit of background. So when it came to regular cigarettes, it took decades for them to figure out just how unsafe they were. And part of it is because with the history, the tobacco companies have been powerful even before, way before we were born. And back then they can empower, or they could basically get physicians on board to say that these are safe. Hence, in my video, I actually had an article that was having a doctor advertise. That was very common. And so it took a very long time for the science outside of the industry to determine, hey, this isn't a safe product. So it may be the same way with vaping. Of course, we're a little bit faster when it comes to scientific discoveries and then translation towards just general knowledge. The one thing I will admit is that most of us basic scientists are really bad at taking information and digesting it in a way that people can understand. But there's still issues that with vaping, we definitely see risks for stroke, risks for cardiovascular disease. So that's one of those things that's just due to nicotine and nicotine's actions. But there's a lot of other things that we won't know for a while because we have to look at what happens long term. So for the people that are vaping now, what's going to happen to them in 10 years? Unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that it's going to take time to figure out.
Okay, yeah. In some of the presentations I do, I show some of the advertisements that the big tobacco companies used to run, back before the Surgeon General's report in the 60s that showed the link between combustible cigarettes and cancer. They were doctors recommend this brand of cigarettes to help with digestion, and your dentist recommends this brand of cigarettes. And yeah, it's crazy to look back knowing what we know today at all of those advertisements. So we have a question in the chat. So Brandon said he saw that Big Tobacco was making cigarettes and e-cigarettes with enough nicotine to cause and sustain addiction. Is that true?
Yeah, so that's another loaded question, because when it comes to the product line so there's different types of vaping products. So there's the disposable e-cigarettes. Those are the ones that you buy, you use, and you just toss. They're the pod-based systems like Puff Bar and Juul. So basically you get a unit and then you just insert pods. And then there's the vape tanks, where basically you just buy the liquids and you just fill up the tank, and then you can just use it as you go. So it's extremely customizable, but with the question of the amount that is sufficient to basically cause and sustain addiction, really it's a yes, because it's nicotine at many different doses can be it can basically trigger and sustain addiction. And that's just because nicotine, even at small amounts, it basically it kind of gets soaked up in the brain. So the scientific term is that it will saturate the brain cells at very low concentrations. It can also be stored inside of neurons due to this process called acid trapping. But I know that basically is way over what you guys would need to know. So just know it'll stay in the brain for a very long time at very low concentration. So really, the amount that's in the different products, it really just depends upon the person, because different people have different sensitivities. But that's also why there's a wide line of products. It's one of those things where, so people that try, it's like, oh, this is too much. Well, guess what? There's one that has less nicotine, then they can try that. Someone, tries, let's just say, a low nicotine percentage Puff Bar, like this is nothing. And then they can go get like higher percentage yield, or they can go to a tank-based system where they can get their own, whatever their desired amount of nicotine is, and then they can get that. That'll be robust enough for them, and then they'll keep coming. So so the answer is yes, because even the vaping companies that weren't part of Big Tobacco, now there are companies that basically have got bought up, and it's the thing you have to think about is, are they just running the same game plan as they did with the combustible cigarettes that started decades ago? Most likely, because really at the end of the day, they want people to use their product. Even if they may be funding research for reducing nicotine dependence, I honestly don't trust that they're actually trying to do that. So that's my opinion, not the opinion of my university or the society I work with. That's just my personal opinion. But I know that there's many people that share that.
Oh, I totally understand. So the next question kind of goes hand in hand with that one. What exactly is in e-liquids and vape juice?
Yes, so the base is propylene glycol vegetable glycerin. So that's kind of like in every different type of vaping product. And then after that, it really just depends. So a lot of them will have nicotine and PGVG, and some of them will be nicotine free, but really there's a question about how many of those are actually nicotine free. And then after that, it's literally thousands of combinations. So there's over 10,000 combinations of nicotine with different types of chemical flavors. And if I were to take this camera and walk over to my lab, we actually have this thing called the flavor wheel, because 98% of vaping products are flavored. I can't even find people that use an unflavored vaping product. But so when you think about the different flavors, so for example, green apple is a flavor, but then there's 5 popular chemical flavors used at different ratios. So green apple by itself can have maybe 100 different types of ratios in different vaping products. And so when you think about things that are like vanilla, vanilla apple, then you basically add the different types of vanilla flavors that may be mixed with green apple flavors. So it's a huge mess, and that's one of the issues when it comes to the basic science side. How do we study this when there's so many combinations? Really, my job is basically getting more labs invested into the research so we can basically tackle this. So the short answer is there's a lot of things, but at the base, propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, they're in everything. But that's also important, and I don't want to not mention this, is that they're unique in the sense that they produce chemicals not present in combustible cigarettes. So, for example, a lot of people know that nicotine's the addictive component of tobacco products and vaping products, but because of PGVG and just the unique chemistry of it, it actually promotes a alkaloid of nicotine that basically makes nicotine do its job better. And that's very complicated chemically. And just so it's one of those things where that's newly discovered. And so now we got to figure out what that does to addiction. So, and the hypothesis is just basically making nicotine be more addictive. So a lot of things are in the products. It's complicated, and that would be probably a 2-hour lecture on itself. So I'll just stop there.
Okay. We had another question that came in via the Google form that we put up, and it's asking about the safety of flavoring if you inhale it versus the safety of ingesting the flavor. Some of the products may have flavoring that is FDA approved, to ingest them, but what is the difference when you're inhaling them?
Yeah, great. So that's a great question. So the flavors they're safe. Most of them are safe topically. I would say almost all of them topically. And then also if you were to orally ingest them, or that's something that's been vetted by the FDA a long time ago. But the reason why they're safe is because there's this thing called the first pass mechanism. So basically, as you put something into your mouth, it goes down your throat into your intestines. So you have small, large intestine, and then your stomach. So basically, everything's it's degraded to a point where it's at concentration that's not going to be toxic. So what's unique to any inhaled method is that you have a rapid delivery to the brain. So the way that works is because since our heart and our brain are the most essential organs we have. So when it comes to that, the most important organs get the oxygen demand first. And so that's why the lungs are a critical aspect of your whole system. So as you inhale something, that oxygen will go directly into the brain because the brain just really needs all that oxygen. But that also makes a very effective delivery system when it comes to chemicals. That's why, some formulations of things just work best with an inhaled method. Think about if you have asthma, you have an inhaler, that's a bronchodilator. So that's a very rapid onset of, which is great when you have an asthma attack and you need relief. But that also provides an avenue for chemicals to get into an area that, let's just say, like there's this thing called the blood-brain barrier, which is protecting the brain from getting, too much of some of the chemicals that may be circulating throughout the body. But because of the oxygen demand and just the way the lungs are functioning, these chemicals can get into the brain at concentrations we've never really seen before. And that's why we're seeing new effects. Most of them that I've seen are behavioral. The toxicologists, they're just now getting into this. So as far as like the question of toxicity, that's still being worked on. We are not really sure what the toxicity is specific to the brain. There's been a lot of peripheral studies. So outside of the brain, when it comes to the lungs, cardiovascular system, they've looked at the toxicology there. They've seen some effects. But when it comes to the brain and specific toxicity related things in the brain, we're not sure what the flavors will do on that regard, but we definitely know they're affecting the neurons that are important for reward. So basically the feel-good sensation, that they can directly affect them, and that's one of the ways that they can support nicotine addiction or contribute to addiction by themselves.
All right. So the next question kind of goes along with that. How do addictive substances alter the brain? You want to
Okay.
start there?
Yeah. So I'm actually giving a lecture to medical students on this, and that's a 2-hour lecture. It used to be 3, but we're trying to make it a little bit more efficient. So the shortest thing I can say is that all drugs of abuse, they alter the dopamine system. So dopamine is one of the neurochemicals that's important for learning and memory and rewards. So for example, for those of us that have kids, like in my video, I had a picture of my kids. Like when I hug them, I get a massive dopamine spike, which is just tends to be bigger than when I give my wife a hug. Not that I love her less, it's just that they're twins. There's 2 of them, so it's additive. But really, so cocaine is one of the examples that a lot of scientists use because it has such a strong magnitude of effect. It makes it easy to learn about the neurobiology. So I'll start with cocaine and I'll work my way back to nicotine. So with cocaine, what happens is dopamine is released. So if let's just pretend that my hand is where the dopamine comes out. Cocaine will basically block these areas where the dopamine is supposed to come back in and get degraded. And so what happens is the dopamine will just stay out and just keep stimulating the neurons on the other side of the connection. So that's one of the ways that drugs of abuse can alter dopamine signaling. With nicotine, basically, it's kind of on the opposite end. So if this is the end where dopamine comes out, nicotine will start binding in these areas where it actually increases the release of dopamine. So the brain is electrical and chemical. So what happens is you need the electrical charge to release dopamine. So you can think of it as like it's supercharging the neurons so that they can release more dopamine when it comes to specific contexts. So that's also why you have the drive to get it, because when you don't have nicotine, what happens is your neurons are less active. You feel depressed. You feel like you're missing something. You also have some somatic symptoms. You're irritable, and basically you're in that state until you get more nicotine, and so that becomes a driving factor when it comes to just the continued use of nicotine. If you talk to a lot of the people that are nicotine dependent, I mean, they don't tell you, oh, I feel so great when I'm smoking. It's more about, I wish I could stop doing this, but I just can't. So that's what a lot of people say, especially when they're like maybe 8 years into their dependence on nicotine. So.
Yeah. So that kind of goes along with the question that we just got in the chat. Can nicotine affect anger issues?
Yeah, so nicotine, to a lot of people, people like me, a lot of us, we focus on just the reward and addiction side of it, but nicotine has a lot of other effects. So it affects anxiety. So for some people, it's an anxiolytic. So what that means is it decreases anxiety. Some people, it actually can enhance it, and really it just depends on the type of person. So it's also a CNS stimulant. So when it comes to, there's different types of people. So some people are just calm by nature. Some people are more aggressive. So those people that are kind of have aggressive tendencies, it would enhance that because it's a CNS stimulant. Other people that will be, say, like below the threshold, if their threshold for aggression is here and they're normally here, the CNS stimulant actions of nicotine may basically push them past that threshold. It really depends upon the person, because also we have to consider that nicotine is one of those social drugs, because since it's a legal drug of abuse, a lot of people, they get into it because their friends are doing it or their family members are doing it. That's their environment. And so for those of us, I mean, I'm assuming everyone here is from West Virginia. It's one of those things where it's very prominent around here. So it's also kind of like seen, it's almost like alcohol. It's like it kind of makes sociability a little bit easier in some cases. So that's the other thing. So it can go either way. It can kind of make people a little bit calmer, but it can also kind of make people well, it can enhance some of their natural tendencies. Let's just say that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, you know, kind of scary stuff when you don't really know what you're going to get if you use it. So, um, Another question, what are the challenges in working in nicotine research?
Yeah, so right now, just like there's a polarized political environment, there's almost a polarized environment with nicotine and tobacco related research. So for example, like the whole question we're debating is, vaping, is it safe, is it not safe? So in the field, there are people that are saying that it is safe, whereas other people are saying it's not safe, and they're very stuck in their thought process with no compromise. And it's one of those things where it's part of it is there's been decades of research into some sort of healthier alternative, or I'm blanking on like the best key phrase that we use within the field. Sorry, it's a dad brain moment. But so that's one of the challenges right now, is because those two groups aren't really coming together, and it's not really a majority. The majority is kind of in the middle, and we're just kind of say, hey, let's talk about it, because maybe one day it could be safer. And what we can do is take all the people that are smoking combustible cigarettes, saying, hey, this really is safer. We're gonna reduce, because the one thing we don't really know for sure is what's the impact on cancer with vaping products. But we know for sure that smoking combustible cigarettes is responsible for more than 90% of all cases of lung cancer. So if we can at least eliminate lung cancer, that would be a big deal, because of the 500,000 deaths per year due to smoking, a large percentage of that is due to lung cancer. So if we can eliminate that, we can save a lot of lives. And that's really what we want to do, save lives. The best option would just be people to just not smoke, period. But we know that's not going to be possible with the fact that it's a legal drug of abuse. So.
Right. Yeah. So, Raise will keep doing our part to try to, let the youth and the young adults know about the dangers of vaping. So hopefully at some point we'll be able to also, wipe out that generation of tobacco users altogether. So, let's see. What is the one message you would want to keep pushing to youth leaders about nicotine and flavors and e-cigarettes?
So I think that the one thing that I'm learning more and more about, not really the science of it, but it's actually the power of coalitions. So I did a lot of my advanced training in California, and I met and interacted with some of the people that basically caused the flavor ban in San Francisco. And basically it was a small group of people that overpowered that local. Well, it was actually like so basically the tobacco industry came together through a lot of funding to fight that, and still they got the flavors banned in San Francisco. It's one of those things where if you really do assemble a good team of people, you can accomplish a lot. And if your goal is basically getting out awareness and training people, and spreading awareness for the dangers of vaping, in addition to just regular cigarettes, it's one of those things like you never know how big of an impact that can be. And I would just keep, I would say the biggest thing is just to keep encouraging people to do that, because this is probably going to be the only way we can make a big splash. Because at the end of the day, really, it's kind of like us against the tobacco industry, and they may be fewer people, but they've got the dollars. So what we need is the people, so that we can kind of change the tide of the momentum.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, a daunting task to go up against all of the tobacco lobby money that they have, all of the funding that they have. But, we'll keep doing what we're doing, keep recruiting Raise members, and keep taking the message. So it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. So just wanted to, kind of wrap up with, is there any one last message that you want to leave us with today?
So, ooh, I feel like there's a lot I would want to say, but what's like the one last thing I mean, so the science is so basically, so my job is basically to do the science and then inform people. The science is always evolving when it comes to vaping because it's so new. And honestly, I would love to, like, anybody that is an advocate but would also like to get involved in the science. That's one of the things. Like, there's a lot of different ways into that all over the country because there's these things called Tobacco Centers of Research Science, and they do these things. So, like, for people that are middle schoolers and high schoolers or even undergraduates, they have these summer research fellowships, and you can basically sign up for that. And if you want to go spend a summer in Los Angeles and go to USC and do some research, that's an option. As a person that used to live there, I would say don't go to Los Angeles right now. Um, uh, there's that's another way that you can help advocate. You can basically get involved in the science because there's a lot to do, and if we can get more information out there, we can help inform people like the FDA. They're an agency that is completely overwhelmed with all of the vaping products that are coming out, and so they rely on basic scientists to say, hey, this thing you guys should look at. And then a year down the road, they're like, hey, that thing you told us that we should look at, we're going to start looking at it, because that's how behind they are. So,
Yeah.
but that's one thing we can do to kind of help move things along.
Well, that's an awesome opportunity that I wasn't aware of. So I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Maybe I can put that out to some of our Raise crews and see if any of their members might be interested in doing something like that. To help with the research and kind of go on that path. So thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for providing our keynote video. It was an amazing opportunity to hear from you. I know I learned a lot. Our Raise crews have learned a lot. So I hope that Dr. Henderson, for all of our Raise crews, I hope that he has motivated you to continue in your efforts to fight against big tobacco. If you haven't already, be sure to check out Dr. Henderson's keynote video. It is on the Tobacco Free Month landing page as well as on our YouTube page. So that'll be there for anybody to watch, on your own time and your own schedule. So on behalf of myself and all the members of Raise, Dr. Henderson, thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure working with you, and we are going to be leaving all fired up to go make a difference. So thank you to everyone for joining us today, and I hope that everybody has had a wonderful tobacco-free month. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.